Good evening, Michael. Good evening. We're learning Maseches Yevamos daf Pei. Baruch Hashem. We're about 10 lines down at the two dots on Pei Amud Aleph at Rabbi Eliezer Omer low key. And this, what it was talking about, if you look back at the Mishnah on Ayin Tes Amud Beis, at the top of that page, there was a machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. The Rabbi Eliezer was of the opinion that a Sris Chama could do chalitza. So the Gemara here says, really, they can do chalitza? How can that be? Or minhu, at the two dots on Pei Amud Aleph, the Gemara says we have a brisa that doesn't seem to agree with the approach of Rabbi Eliezer. In regards to a yavam who is ben esrim shana v'lo hevi shtei sairos, let's say that a man, Ruvain, was married to Rachel, Ruvain died, and Shimon, who was the brother, he was starting to show simanim that he was a sris. How so? Because he was 20 years old. V'lo hevi shtei sairos. He had no pubic hairs at all. Yaviu rayashu ben esrim v'hu hasris. He can go into his family records and show his birth certificate, show his age, and then once we see how old he is, and he's considered a sris, lo choletz v'lo miyabin, because he's a sris. And you can marry when you're a sris. That's not, you can't do evil. What about bas esrim v'lo hevi shtei sairos? A woman who is 20 years old and she did not. She has yet to grow shtei sairos. So Beis Hillel is crystal clear that when it comes to someone who is 20 years old, they give people 20 years to verify that they're in fact a sris. That if by the time they get to that age, we then verify that they're a sris, the halacha is that there's no chalitz or yibu. Ubeis Shammai omrim, we're just about halfway down on Pei Amud Aleph. Ubeis Shammai omrim zeh v'zeh b'nei shmona esrei. He just disagrees with the threshold. Beis Hillel was of the opinion that the threshold for establishing someone as a sris is 20. Masha'ein came the shita of Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says 20. Beis Shammai says 18. Rabbi Eliezer, he splits the shita as follows. Rabbi Eliezer Marazachar Kedibir Beis Hillel at the age of 20. By men, we use 20 as the parameter. Unakeva Kedibir Beis Shammai, and women we follow like Beis Shammai, which is 18 years. Lavo Lifnei Ha'ish. This should become a bumper sticker. Women mature more quickly than men do. And that is why we assume that a woman should have reached the status of sris. If she's going to be a sris, it's going to be at 18. We assume that by 18 for a woman, that she's not going to go back to a state of fertility if she's still showing the signs of infertility. On the next amud, on Pei Amud Beis, we're going to see a long brisa about the simane sris and islandess. Some of them are very unique, as we'll see. Let's continue. Anyways, this is a kasha on the shita of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah says, and if you look back a third of the way down on Ayin Tes Amud Beis, Rabbi Eliezer says, "Sris chama choletz v'choltzin leishto." Yeah, what does our Gemara say? That once you hit a certain age, you're done. It's about age. It's not about refuah. So how can Rabbi Eliezer stand on his own 2 feet in our Mishnah on Ayin Tes Amud Beis? The Gemara presents 2 answers. Answer number 1, halfway down Pei Amud Aleph, Amar Rami Bar Dikule Amar Shmuel Chazar Bo Rabbi Eliezer. He retracted. We don't have the chronology of what came first, our Mishnah or this brisa. So Ibayalahu Mahi Hadarbe, which one is the right shita? We don't know. Is it our Mishnah where he says chalitza still applies by Sris Chama, or is it the brisa where it seems to not be that way? Tashma, the Gemara answers with a brisa. The Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Sris Chama choletz v'choltzin leishto shekain b'minon misrapin b'alachsander shel Mitzrayim. So that's what the Gemara says is that we hold that Sris Chama is choletz v'choltzin leishto, just like our Mishnah, and the brisa was an earlier Mari Makom and incorrect. Rabbi Elazar Amar le'olam lo hadarbe. Rabbi Elazar is not Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer was the author of part of our Mishnah on Ayin Tes. Rabbi Elazar, the Amora, says le'olam lo hadarbe. Really, no, there's no stira between the brisa and the Mishnah. He was not hadarbe. Rabbi Eliezer did not retract the brisa shita to then write the Mishnah on Ayin Tes Amud Beis. Rather, b'chitnan hahila onshin. This Mishnah, this brisa that we quoted over here at the 2 dots on Pei Amud Aleph, this brisa is teaching us the age at which onshin kick in, prior to which we would not have any onshin. And we'll discuss a machlokas amoraim about this in just a few lines. Actually, in the next sugya, we'll discuss it. But really, there's no stira. In the Mishnah on Ayin Tes Amud Beis, halacha is choletz v'lo choltzin. But choletz v'choltzin. But when it comes to onshin, that only applies by ages 18 and up. And itmar, 2/3 of the way down, achal chelev mi bein shtei mesrei v'yom echad ad ben shmona esrei. And then v'noldu bo simon isris. So what's the case? Ochal is a masculine word. However, if you look at the age in the brisa, it's mi ben shtei mesrei v'yom echad, a person who is 12 years and 1 day. So Rashi, 4 lines before the wide line, says that the grammar is off. Itmar garsinan mi ben yud beis yud ches atinokes kai. It's referring to a female. It's not referring to a man. Why does it say ochal? Don't know, but it's referring to a female. So let's look back inside.
Isn't that what we call the Nara? Several hundred, whatever, several.
The what?
Ago?
Yes, but it says ochal. It should be ochla. Just saying basic Hebrew, itmar.
No, I understand that.
She's a Nara. That's what we're discussing. Well, in part, that's what we're discussing, as we'll see at the bottom of the page. But it's just a grammar problem. It's not a big problem. It's just the language is weird. It says, Achal chelev mi ben shtei mesrei v'yom echad ad ben shmona esrei. V'noldu bo. Ba? Why doesn't it say ba?
Right.
So all of the seemingly normal rules of grammar fall away. And the Rashi says we're talking about a female, even though the grammar seems to be talking about a male. And then after the fact, so let's say she was 14 years old. She's between 12 and 1 day and 18 years old. And she ate chelev, which is asur. And then only after that, v'noldu ba simone sris, ula'achar mikan hevi shtei saros. So then she became a sris proper. And then she grew shtei saros. Oh, so what do we do now? She ate the chelev. So do we say that really we're megala now that because she has shtei saros, she was never an islandess, and therefore she's going to be chayeves? We just didn't know she wasn't an islandess till now. Or do we say, no, we just look at that like kind of flash in the pan, the moment in time when you ate it, we thought you were a sris. So that's a machlokas amoraim. And Rav says, Rav Amar Nasa sris lamafreya. We are retroactive. What we see now with the shtei saros is a gilui milsa lemafreya. Now we know that we were wrong about you, that you were never a sris. You ate chelev, you're chayiv on the chelev. However, Ushmuel Amar katan haya be'osasha. No, you were a child at that time. Halachically speaking, you're a child until otherwise proven as an adult. And the shtei saros makes you into an adult. Currently, you're a sris. Oh, you grew shtei saros when you're 16, 17 years old. Okay, well, whatever. But at the moment, you were a ketana.
But so is sris and islandess, are they being used interchangeably?
Here they are. That's why. That's what.
It's so confusing.
Yeah, it's just confusing. But the real evidence that we're talking about a girl is 12 years in 1 day, because that's a zero for a boy. You're a little child. That's nothing. But for a girl, you're a gedola, or you're a nara. That's when from 12 to 6, from 12 and 1 day to 12 and 6 months, you're a nara. So that's what the Gemara says. Maskif lo Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef sees this machlokas between Rav and Shmuel, and he says, he says there's a problem. According to Rav, who holds that Nasa Sris Lamafreya or Nasa Islandess Lamafreya, that it's Megala Milsa now, that when she grows the Shtei Saros, that really she never was a Sris. And therefore, according to Rav, we would go back and make sure she has a consequence. Then if that's true, Islandess L'Reb Meir Yehei Laknas, then we're not going to get into the whole sugya now, but in a case of a girl who is violated, the Chumash writes that a woman, that the girl's father gets paid 50 shekel, but it only applies under certain circumstances. It only applies when she's a Na'ara. But according to Rav, she should be a Nara at that time, because if retroactively we're saying she was never an islandess, that means that when she was 12 and 1 day, that she was actually a Nara. When we thought she was a Sris, then there's no Naras. She's always a Ktan. But now that we know when she's 18, however old she is, and now she says that she's grown 2 hairs, so that if that's the case, then she was a Nara. Then according to Rameir, the Yesh Yehela Knas, there should be the 50 shekel fine if she was violated during that period of time. So Amar Le Abaye Mikatnusa Yatzitz Bagar. No, the way we look at it is that even according to Rav, she goes from Katnus to Bagrus. And here's the flow of events. Up until the age of 12, a girl is considered a Ketana. From 12 years and 1 day to 12 years and 6 months, she's considered a Nara. From 12 years and 6 months and 1 day, and for the rest of her life, she's considered a Bogeres. So the din is that we really only have the halacha of paying the 50 shekel when she's a Nara. And because, even according to Rav, even though he holds retroactively, we would look back and say, really, she was a healthy, normal child. She just was a late bloomer. So she had no shtei saros until she was older. But the mafreya, really, she was a Nara. We don't look at it that way. Even according to Rav, we would say she goes from Katnus and skips Naras and goes straight to Bagrus. Omar Le, Rav Yosef says to Abaye, that's a beautiful thing you just said. Kol ki hani mili ma'al yasa yis amru mishamai, it looks like. It's not correct. So if you look in the Hagos V'Tzionim, it changes mishamai to mishmi, and he's talking about himself. So Rav Yosef is talking now, all of these beautiful things that you just said, they're basically things that I said. Basically, I agree with you. Titania, the Brisa writes 6 lines from the bottom. Ein hasris nidon keben soreh rumoreh. A sris is not judged like a ben soreh mor. He has to have pubic hair in order for him to be considered a ben soreh rumoreh. So let's say that there was a case scenario where the boy is a late bloomer, but he did all the violations of a ben soreh rumoreh, the tarte marshal basar and the yain ha'italki, he did whatever he did wrong. Perfectly wrong. However, he has no zakan tachton, he has no pubic hair. So the din is it's a 0. That's not ben sora remor. You have to have all the stars align perfectly for someone to be killed as a ben sora remor. Doesn't apply to him. Vein islandess nidonis kenara hamil rasa, and as well an islandess, a woman, a girl who's infertile, she's not judged like a nara hamil rasa shemikanusa yatzas alabagar, because she skipped, as we mentioned in answering up Rav. The way Abaye answered up the question on Rav is that when we are looking back retroactively, that now is a gdola. Now she shows shtei when she's 18 years old. Therefore, we see she never really was a sris or never really was an islandess, and maybe she was a nara, and the 50 shekels should be paid if she was violated. No, she's not, because even according to Rab, we skip from katnus to bagra, skipping over nara. Omar Rabbi Abo, Simone sris, the islandess uben shmona ein osen ben ma'asad shuben esrim. When you see in a person, in a boy, that he is showing signs of being a sris, or of a girl that she's showing signs of being an islandess, or a boy that's born in the 8th month of gestation, we don't do anything with them in regards to the issues that apply here, any issues that apply with sris, islandess, and ben shmona, until they turn 20. Now, there was an assumption in the time of Chazal that a child could be born healthy in the 7th month and in the 9th month, but we assumed in the times of Chazal, and we'll see an explicit Marimakum in a moment, that a child born in the 8th month was not a viable child. So it says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom on Pei Amud Aleph, Ben Shmon Mikachai, V'Tanya, the Brisa writes, Ben Shmon Hareu Ke'evan V'Aser L'Taltalo. If a child is born in the 8th month and then Shabbos happens, it happens every 7 days, so then he's Aser L'Taltalo, the child is Muktzah. It's an unbelievable idea. And the Gemara says wildly, Aval imo shoche alavu menikto, that a woman is able to lean over her child. She can't pick up the child. She can lean over the child in order to nurse that child, no problem. Why? Top of Pam, beis mipnei sakana. Who is the danger for? Is it for the child or is it for the mother? Says Rashi, both. Rashi libra masal mimnei sakana shnehem haben behaim shelo yar bechalav hadadim, that she shouldn't be engorged with milk, the te'anis v'tamus, and then she'll lose her capacity to nurse, and then the baby could die. So it's one concern that really applies to both people. So anyways, the Gemara says that this child who's a ben ches, that he's born during the 8th month of gestation, he's considered muksa, which means that a ben ches is really not viable at all in birth. So then how then does the Brisa include this case of ben shmona? Ben shmona is not viable. That's not a birth that's viable.
So every week she has to do this.
What do you mean every week? Yeah. Until the baby proves himself. Yeah, correct. It's really the first 4 weeks. Once he hits 30 days, he's a bar kayam. We'll discuss that in the Gemara a little bit. The Gemara doesn't ask your question, but it will. Well, you'll see in a minute. You'll see. It says the Gemara, Hacha b'mayaskinan. And how then do we explain why the case of Ben Shmona was included in the Mishnah of the Sris and Islandess? I don't think it was a Mishnah, was it? No, it's a Brisa. So it says the Gemara, because kshegamru simonov, it wasn't really an 8th month baby. It was a 7th month baby that stayed in the womb a little bit longer. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means that a 7th month baby, if you see a baby that's born at 8 months and it has certain simanim, it means that it's a 7-month baby. What does that mean? Tanya, Ezu ben Shmona, kol lo kalulo chadashav. It's someone doesn't finish all of its months. Rebbe Omer simanim mochichan alav se'aro v'tzipornav shelo gamru. Taima de lo gamru. The reason why he's not viable is because he didn't finish developing. Ha gamru, if in fact he did finish developing, then amrina and hai bar zainhu v'ishtahu yehu de ishtahi. Then we assume that he's a 7-monther who just stayed in a little bit longer. So the Gemara says, really, there's a shita like that a baby who is born in the 8th month but with fingernails and hair, he's considered a 7-monther, and we're only concerned about an 8th month baby when he has no fingernails and developed hair. That's what the Gemara seems to say. We should highlight right now that this is a das yachid. The Rabbanan don't agree with him, because the Rabbanan said it's just about kalu lo chadashav. That was the beginning of the Brisa. Eze ben shmona kol shelo kalu lo chadashav. Look at the calendar. When was he born? Yes or no? But Rebbe gives is the das yachid. So it says the Gemara, he's a das yachid. That brings up a kasha. Elahada avad rabba tosfa uvda beisha shahalach baila lemedina saya. A woman's husband went out of town. V'ishtahi ad tresar yarche shata ve'achshrei. And she had a baby 12 months after he left. Now, I am no mathematician, but if a woman is giving birth 12 months after her husband has left town, and she was right, so how could it be v'achsharei that this child was treated as her child? How is that possible? Says the Gemara, Kiman, it must be that Rava Tosfa, who said that this baby with a 12-month gestational period was a kasher, it must be Kirebi, the Amar Mishtahe, who says that a baby can stay longer than he normally would. Hafla v'fela. But he can't say that. Why not? Because it's the Tanakama against Rebbe, and Yachid v'Rabbi Malacha Kram. You can't paskin like Rebbe. Rebbe Shita is a das Yachid. This also seemingly ignores the impossibility of a woman being pregnant for 12 months. I don't know what the maximum is. I have a feeling it's less than 12 months. I could be wrong because the world is a crazy place. But to not assume that there's nus here, that goes against every basic piece of biology that we know. And even svara, our own instincts right on the spot. That's nus. She cheated. 3 months in, she got pregnant from somebody else. You should assume that. That would be normal. Says the Gemara, no, that maybe Rav Tosva paskins like Rebbe, but how can you do that? It's a das yach. It says the Gemara, Keivan Dika Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel to Amr Mishtahi. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel uses this principle of delayed birth. Therefore, Kirabim Avad. It's therefore that really there's two shitas. There's Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and therefore Rav Tosva does allow for this woman to assume that the child belongs to the initial husband, even though it has been 12 months instead of the normal 9. Tanya, what was the case of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel? Rashba Gomer Kol Shasha Lamed Yom Adam Eino Nefel. That once a child is born and he lives 30 days, so then he's no longer a Nefel. But really, what that means is that he was a 7-month baby who stayed an extra month. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that he's an 8th-monther that lived. It's not possible. 8th-monthers don't live. What it is, it's a 7th-monther who was developed and then stayed an extra 30 days in utero. The haraya that he had fingernails and hair. That's how we know it's a 7th-monther. But when an 8th-month baby is born and he's not going to live, he doesn't have hair and nails. So it has to be a 7th-monther who stayed extra. That shows us that Rashbag holds of this idea of shaha, that the child waited an extra 30 days, which means that Rebbe is not standing alone. It's not a das yachid anymore. Rebbe holds it. And that's why Rav Tosva held like Rebbe. And Rebbe is also like Rashbag. They both hold of shiur, that you can wait an extra period of time in utero, and therefore all is well and good. This brisa coming up is a very straightforward and simple brisa. We'll read it pretty quickly. Tanu Rabbanon, a third of the way down on Peyam Beis. Ezu Sris Chama. How do we determine what a Sris Chama is? Kol Shu Ben Esrim V'lo Hevi Shtei Saro, someone who's 20 who doesn't have pubic hair. Ve'afilu Hevi La'achar Mikan Hareu Kisris L'chol Dvar. If he shows hair finally at age 22, doesn't matter. He's a Sris L'chol Dvar. Ve'elu Hein Simanov. These are the signs of a Sris Chama. Kol She'ein Lo Zakan. He doesn't have a beard, and whatever hair he has is very light. Ubisaro machlik, and his skin is super smooth. Rashi here highlights a third of the way down, almost halfway down. Machlik, Rashi says, chalak kibasar isha. Derech basar ish liyos seir, to be more hairy. And for the average woman, she typically is a little bit less hairy. Rashba Gomer mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Yair kol she'ein meimav ma'alin resichos. Literally, the word resichos means to boil, but what it means is that when a person urinates, it doesn't create bubbles in the water, just like when there's boiling, there's bubbles. So when a person urinates, there's no resichos. Like we saw the other day, that we don't, that when a person urinates and their urine stream doesn't form an arc in its shape, so then the person's a sris chama. If a person's zera, if the semen is particularly thin, that if urine after due time doesn't smell bad, so that is also a siman. Fascinating. Anyone who washes themselves in the rainy season and there's no steam coming off of their body in the shower. If you have a person who has a very high register of their voice, and when you close your eyes, you don't know if they're male or female, so then these are all the simanim of Sris Chama that the Gemara says. Which ones are halacha l'maaseh? You got to look through all of them. A lot of them seem to be quoted in the Rambam. A little bit more than halfway down, 4 lines before the wide lines. Ve'ezo hi islandness. How do we determine when a woman is infertile? If a woman is 20 years old and she has no hair whatsoever on her body, even if she grows it afterwards, she's a sris. What about alopecia? What about someone who, is that sris? I can't imagine it's sris. I know people who have alopecia and they have large families. But what would the Gemara have done? What would someone with alopecia have had back in the day?
Does hair count the same way?
I mean, I know someone who doesn't have one hair follicle on their whole body.
I'm talking about the way the Gemara says.
No, but it's talking about zakan tachton.
Right. So the fact that you have no hair whatsoever
On your head, it's something
I'm
else.
talking about on his whole body. He's alopecia. You're agreeing to the question. I'm saying, yeah,
I would
alopecia.
assume.
Alopecia on his whole body.
Yeah, I would assume that that's not called that you didn't get as a contact.
Why?
You don't have any hair.
There's no
Exactly.
No hair. It's not.
No, but if you don't
No,
have
but
any
it's
hair
not
on your
connected
head,
to Sris, to being a Sris or an island.
You're saying because he has no hair anywhere else on his
Anyway.
body.
It's
I wondered. Yeah, could be.
Judge anything.
it's
Right,
it's
I mean-
indication that it's something, that it could be something else.
Well, you have a medical head from modern culture. I'm curious what they would have done back in the day. They would have said, the boy would have said, I have no hair anywhere on my body. And I could easily see them saying from the Gemara, well, you're a Sris. I don't know. I'm just conjecturing. I don't know. There's someone my age who has alopecia areata, not one follicle of hair, raising a beautiful family.
Yeah, so.
I can't imagine he's a Sris. He's from a family. Like it's just it's hard to believe.
But alopecia that we know today, right?
Today.
It's all the hair on the body. It's not just.
Well, we're going to see in a few minutes. There's a machlokes. Do only some of these conditions apply, or do all of them apply? So that would solve that. That would solve that problem. Correct. Belohein simoneha. Here are some of the signs of a woman who's an islandess.
Jump back, but more practical.
Yeah.
So that's the thing for Bella, is somebody that can most you for a mitzvah d'oraisa, right? You would never dream that a person with alopecia.
Could you say that again? Sorry. Say what was that?
Shtei Cyrus is
Oh,
a
yeah.
simon for a god.
Oh,
Most
midoraisa,
you for a mitzvah d'oraisa, right? You never dream of questioning. I don't think somebody's alopecia, whether you can make Kiddush for you on Friday night, that would never enter your mind.
It would enter my mind
What?
because of Shtei Saros. It would enter my mind. I would have said, well, Shtei Saros.
I don't know exactly what you
I know, but
do.
what-
I remember there was a
Before
boy,
today's
there
not.
was a guy a year older than me who had just turned 13 and he wanted to learn Parsha Zachor. So they said, we have to see that you're a man.
Because he had alopecia.
No,
No.
he just wanted to lane. He was a regular kid. He wanted to lane, but they said Shtei Saros. We have to make sure you have Shtei Saros. And you're and without Shtei Saros, you have no Ne'emonos as a gadol. They had to physically
Right.
check.
Right.
So whatever. I don't know. I'm sure I'm wrong. I'm just like from the pashtus of the Gemara. Like
I hope
I'm wrong. Yeah. From the pashtus of the Gemara, it seems that there are these metrics that we look at that are objective. They don't seem to care about the circumstances. In regards to a woman called she'ein la dadim, a woman who doesn't have breasts, she's not developed. Umiskashe b'shas tashmish, and tashmish amita is very uncomfortable for her. We had this shaila. This came up once in NCSY. There was a girl who wanted to be a boy. She was very underdeveloped and she wore a compression sleeve around her chest. She dressed in button-down shirts. She sat on the boys' side. She's a girl. The male advisors did not know, arm in arm during dancing in Havdalah. Pashut had no clue. Unbelievable. Okay. Huh? Until I called an emergency meeting with all of the staff in the kitchen on one of our Shabbatons to let them know, because they were in the middle of Havdalah and there were male advisors on each side of her with their arms together. There was this Givaldig, this Ruchnius, Isser Doraisa, Isser Doraisa is strong, but it's Ruchnius. It's just not right. And it's not fair to the staff. It's not fair.
You waited till Abdullah to tell him?
It was the first time. It's very good. I mean, it wasn't my responsibility, but I noticed it on that night. But somebody should have told them. Where do they sleep? We slept them in isolation. Whoever was in charge, because if you can't sleep with the boys, you're a girl. You can't sleep with the girls because you think like a boy. So like it's very. Anyways, in this particular case, it's a siman of islandness. If she has no dadim, and if miskasha b'shas tashmish is very painful. So those are simanim. Women, the Gemara says, have a little bit of a tummy right above the pubic area. And the Gemara says if a woman is lacking that seems to be an accolade in the modern times to have those washboard abs. The Gemara says it's a siman isha to have shipule me'ayim. That's what the Gemara says. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, call shekola avif. Woman has a very thick voice. Ve'enu nikeres bein isha leish, and you can't tell. You can't tell if her voice is male or female. Itmar Simone Sris Rav Huna Amar Achihu Kulam. Rav Huna says we need all of these boxes to be checked, not just some of them. All of the boxes need to be checked in order to be a Sris or an islandess. Rav Yochanan Amar Afilu be'echad mehem. So if we paskin like Rav Yochanan, and based on the Rambam's notation, it seems that way. So then I might be right. I hope I'm wrong, but I might be right that you could have a case where even one of these features show up. If you have a woman who's very underdeveloped, she's a Sris. If you have a woman who's has painful tashmish amita, but it's fully developed, she's a Sris. It's wild. It's just a wild thing. It's wild. Anyways, the Gemara qualifies the machlokes a little bit, 8 lines from the bottom. If a woman has shtei saros, then she needs to be counter-indicated with all of the other ones in order to make her into a sris. Really, the machlokes Rav Huna and Rav Yochanan is where there isn't shtei saros. And that means that if we paskin like Rav Yochanan, if she has no shtei saros and any other one feature, then she's a sris. which is a wild conclusion of the Gemara. Rav Nachman was known to not have shtei sa'aros. He was known to not have pubic hair, and he was an otherwise eligible bachelor, but they wanted to make sure he wasn't a sris. So and if in fact when he's in the bathhouse we see the steam coming off of him, which was one of the simanim of being a sris and the most agshanim, but if they see that water's coming off of his body, then isiv li baras, then I know he's not a sris, and therefore I'm going to give him my daughter to marry. Okay. Kiman, who does that seem to be like? Ki Rav Huna, that seems to be like the Shita of Rav Huna. Lo, it's not. It's Rav Nachman Sichi Dikna Habile. Really, he had some stubble. He did have some hair on his body. It just wasn't as pronounced as with other people. Fine. 4 lines from the bottom, quoting from our Mishnah from Ayin Testament Bays. Asris lacholetz v'lo miyabim v'chein islandus. Katani sris doma the islandus. That a sris is similar to an islandus in the following way. My islandus bidei shamayim, asris bidei shamayim. That we determine the status of an islandus and a sris in the same way that it has to be bidei shamayim. The stomach Rabbi Akiva, and also a stam Mishnah in this case is like Rabbi Akiva. The Amar bidei Adam in bidei shamayim lo, is that bidei Adam when the injury is from, not the injury, when the scenario of a sris is bidei Adam, then there is chalitza, and bidei shamayim, when it's from shamayim lo, there is no chalitza, and that's the same yisod. What does that mean? It means that when it's from shamayim, your mamish is sris, and therefore there's no yibum chalitza by you. It's not shayach by you. So Rabbi Akiva has verified this opinion based on the Stam Mishnah. 2 lines from the bottom, asris shechalas liyavimta lo pasla, but if there was tashmish amita between the sris and the yavama, it would pasel her taima de ba'alahu, because the yavama had tashmish amita with her. Ha'acher, but what if she slept with someone else, a regular guy? Says the Gemara lo, then maybe the halacha would be different. And lema tehave tapa pe'alef amar aleph, lema tehave tiyuvta de Rav Hamnuna. Maybe this should reject the shita of Rav Hamnuna de Amar shomeres yavam shezinsa psula liyavama, that a shomeres yavam who has tashmish amita is only psula with a yavam. No, that's not correct. Lo, if she sleeps with anyone, she'd be considered problematic. Lo, hu adina filu la'achar nami, that she'd be psula. Ba'idi de tana reisha bidida tana nami seifa bididei. Excuse me, tani nama seifa bididei. It was only speaking from the context of the yavam, and that's why we were referring to the yavam. But it wasn't meant to the exclusion of her sleeping with someone else, which would make her into a psula. That they did have tashmish amita, that would have been the psul for her. Halo be'aluha. This is talking about a different case, so the halachos will be different. The previous case was with the yevama, and this is talking about an islandess. So in regards to the islandess, taima de be'aluha, she'd become tmei if they sleep with her. Halo be'aluha lo keman. Who's that like? It's to look Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says that it doesn't matter who you sleep with because you're an islandess. The look Rabbi Yehuda, dik Rabbi Yehuda, ha'amar islandess zona. We would therefore see that the islandess is going to be a zona. Fine. So these are various halachas. We just concluded that last Mishnah. Let's start the next Mishnah. We're going to go until about 10 lines from the bottom of the page, and we'll stop in the midst of a machlokas Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish, and then we'll call it a day. Says the Gemara in a new Mishnah, Pei Aleph Amid Aleph, 8 lines down. Sris Chama Kohen Shanasa Bas Yisrael Ma'achila B'Truma. If you have a Sris Chama who's a Kohen and he marries a Jewish girl, she's allowed to eat Truma, implying that the marriage is Chal. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Omer, androgynous Kohen Shanasa Bas Yisrael Ma'achila B'Truma, saying that an androgynous can marry a woman, even though he has both anatomies, and Ma'achila B'Truma. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Tumtum Shenikra V'Nimtza Zachar. If there's a tumtum where there's a layer of skin covering over the genitalia, and we don't know what gender this person is, and then their nikra, the skin is torn, V'Nimtza Zachar, Lo Yachalot Mipnei Shu Kisris. There's no din of chalitza by him because he's considered a sris. Androgynous no say, aval lo nisa. An androgynous can marry a woman, but he cannot have a man marry him. He cannot be proposed to. Meaning we treat an androgynous like a man. Rabbi Elazar Omer, androgynous chayav and alav skila kizachar. We treat him like a zachar status. It's interesting if we get into the Rishonim and maybe in the Gemara why that's the case in androgynous. Why is he male? Why is he any more male than he is female? Okay, so the Gemara says in regards to the first case that a Sris Chama Kohen who marries a Bas Yisrael that she's allowed to eat Truma, says the Gemara Pshita. No, not so simple. Mao detema molid machil. Only if the husband is fertile and she's able to therefore have children can she eat truma. And she'ena molid eno machil kamash malan, that's not true. As long as she's married to a kohen, even though he's a sris chama, the halacha is that she is still eligible for truma. The Mishnah had said, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Omer, androgynous. What did they say in our Mishnah? They said that an androgynous kohen who marries a Yisrael is also ma'achila truma. The Gemara says, Amar Reish Lakish, ma'achila b'truma. Yes, that's correct. However, ve'ein ma'achila b'chazah b'shok. They're not allowed to eat certain parts of the shlamim, the chazah and the shok. They're ineligible. Rabbi Yochanan Amar af ma'achila b'chazah b'shok. And now we're going to learn the sheet of Reish Lakish, and then we'll stop and we'll pick up with Rabbi Yochanan tomorrow. Well, the Reish Lakish. Once you're letting them eat truma, which is deoraisa, you should also let them eat the chazav v'shok, which is deoraisa. Why, Reish Lakish, did you choose to distinguish, to draw the line between truma, which this woman is allowed to eat, and chazav v'shok, which she's not? Oh, we're only talking about a case where it's truma bizman hazeh without a beis hamikdash. So then it's only derabanan. Says the Gemara, aval bizman shebeis hamikdash kayamai lo. You would say that they're not allowed to eat truma. If that's true, adatani ein ma'achila b'chazav v'shok. Instead of teaching that she should not eat the chazav v'shok, liflod v'lisni b'dida. You should have made your distinction within our Mishnah itself to say as follows. When is it that Reish Lakish would say that they're allowed to eat truma b'truma derabanan? Aval b'truma deoraisa lo. But had it been that truma was a deoraisa status, we would not allow it. Says the Gemara, we are saying that. Hachinami kamar, that is what we're saying. Kshehu ma'achila, when she's allowed to eat food because of him, ma'achila b'truma bizman hazeh derabanan. Ve'ein ma'achila bizman chazav v'shok ve'afilu b'truma derabanan. And when it is the time of the chazav v'shok, when there's a beis hamikdash, then Reish Lakish would agree that there is zero access to this woman for truma derabanan and chazav v'shok. Why? Because dilma asila ochla b'truma deoraisa. Because she may then come to make an error about truma deoraisa. We're going to stop right here at Rav Yochanan, about 8 lines from the bottom of Pei Aleph, Amud Aleph. The next Amud will go quickly. The blot on Shabbos, Yom Hashem, doesn't appear to be terribly long, and we will pick up then. Wishing you all a beautiful night.